put off making this video for so long because I have such conflicting thoughts on the long trail and I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to say. But now it's been a few months since I finally finished and I'm ready to talk about it. Hi, I'm Katie, aka Double Dip, and I've thru-hiked thousands of miles, including the Continental Divide Trail, Colorado Trail, John Muir Trail, and Long Trail. And honestly, the Long Trail was the trail I was the least excited about starting. I went into the trail in the worst shape of my life and without a strong emotional attachment to anything out east, so I was really worried that the green tunnel and all of the really hard landscape you have to navigate on the Long Trail would get rid of my motivation instantly and I would quit before I even got halfway done. A few things happened on that trail I never saw coming, including one pretty bad injury, but against all odds, I did end up finishing, and so now I want to share with you the 10 things I learned from the Long Trail and how I'm going to carry that forward with me as I continue to backpack. The first thing is the rain, which everyone warned me was going to be a huge issue out east, and I went into the trail expecting to be wet and muggy and miserable the entire time. Honestly, not true at all. One thing that I hadn't fully realized before starting the hike out east is that while yes, it did rain more and it was more humid than the hikes I've done out west, the rain itself was a lot lower consequence and mentally that felt easier for me. Out west, rain can typically mean hypothermia, lightning storms above tree line, and imminent risk of death, whereas out east I just was wet and uncomfortable and it was a little bit annoying. Also, the green tunnel really helped me in that way. The massive canopy of trees above me acted as a little mini umbrella. A lot of times I could hear that it was raining. I could tell that there was active rain happening, but I wasn't getting wet, which was really wonderful. And finally, I don't think people who hike out east brag enough about the shelter system y'all have out there. It's crazy. There were 2 nights where it was going to rain through the night, and all I had to do was hike a slightly different mileage to get to a fully enclosed shelter where I could set up my stuff and fall asleep to the sound of rain on a window pane instead of on my tent. However, this brings me to lesson number 2, which is that the shelters can be a little bit of a dangerous luxury. I like to describe them as golden handcuffs. They're so nice that they ended up altering my hike in ways that I kind of wish they hadn't. I had never used shelters before, and all of the trails I've ever done, it's always just been, oh, you pick a spot on the ground, you throw your sleeping pad down, you throw your tent down if it's raining, and you go to bed. With the shelters, you could look on a map and see exactly how many miles away you were from a 3-sided or even 4-sided shelter for the night. It really surprised me how much I ended up being willing to alter my hiking plans to try to coordinate around making sure I spent a night in a shelter. There were a few days where I only hiked 10 or 15 miles just because I would hit a shelter and realize the next one wasn't for several more miles, and I'd think, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna sleep here. As someone who struggles to sleep in the backcountry, sometimes these shelters were so wonderful. I didn't have the mental exhaustion of having to set up my tent, and I felt a little bit safe from wildlife, even if that didn't make very much sense because one whole wall would be open. However, my least favorite thing I ever encountered on the entire Long Trail was sharing a shelter with someone who snores. There's only so much a pair of earplugs can do, and sometimes I was awake the entire night listening to the chainsaw next to me get the absolute best night's sleep of their life. The third lesson I learned was to not be so pretentious about the wildlife we have out west. I'm so used to seeing all kinds of black bears, grizzly bears, moose, marmot, pika, everything you can imagine when I'm hiking, and I kind of thought all of that would disappear as soon as I crossed the Mississippi. That couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, I saw a moose at the summit of Mount Mansfield, which is the high point of the Long Trail, and almost every single day I had an encounter with some larger wildlife, including bears. I think the difference is more of the sightline. Out west, you're above tree line and you can see something coming from miles away, whereas out east, everything's a little bit more guarded within that tree canopy, and you're more likely to turn a corner and be face to face with a porcupine. We can't talk about wildlife in shelters though without talking about the mice. I've been told that the mice in shelters are just part of the charm, but I think I could have gone my entire life without knowing what it felt like to have a mouse run across my mouth at 4 o'clock in the morning. My fourth lesson was realizing how my hiking pace and my hiking style was going to change with hiking terrain. Out west, you might deal with high altitude challenges and some very steep climbs, but the trails themselves are typically very well graded and very well maintained. Out east, that could not be further from the truth. Anyone who's hiked the Long Trail before can tell you that the majority of the trail is covered in roots and rocks and mud and these slabs of rock that just slide right off into nothingness if you take the wrong step. This did make my uphills a little bit slower because everything was a little bit more scrambly, but the real time cost came on the downhills. Typically out west on downhills, I can turn my brain off and just head downhill and not even worry about the energy exertion on my legs. But on the Long Trail, I had to watch my steps very carefully because one wrong step would send me sliding 20 feet down into a tree. Particularly on the days it rained and that rock got slippery, the steps could be somewhat treacherous. The fifth lesson is that the green tunnel isn't boring. People had told me it was going to be boring. I was expecting to be very bored on this trail, but I just had to look a little bit smaller. I found myself being very enamored with those gradual changes as you gained and lost elevation, and the deciduous forest gave away to this balsam fir area, which gave away to the above treeline areas, which gave you the most beautiful long-distant viewpoints out over Vermont and into New York and New Hampshire. If you're willing to look at the small things like the little jewel-colored newts that run across the rocks and the rolling hills and the variation in the moss you see across the trail, there's actually a lot to look at and a lot to keep you entertained. It's just not going to be those grand sweeping vistas that you get out west. Lesson 6 I learned the easy way, and that is that the long trail is the perfect trail for a shoulder season hike. I hiked it at the end of September into the beginning of October, which meant I got the peak foliage turning, and it was so beautiful. Even when I just had to stare at trees all day, those trees were the most vibrant yellow, orange, and reds I've ever seen before. Yes, the nights might be a little bit cooler, but it's typically less rainy, the crowds are gone, the bugs have left with them, and it was such a pleasant, peaceful, meditative experience. Plus, a little bit later into the hike, as the trees started to lose their leaves and that density went away, it opened up some beautiful viewpoints that didn't even exist on the map. I could see really far out across Vermont's rolling hills and see that patchwork of colors carried out across the entire state. So beautiful, I would recommend it every time. Circling back to the rain for a second for lesson 7, everything just stays damp the entire time. And sure, out west that might mean risk for hypothermia, so it's not quite as dangerous as it is there, but oh my god, it is so annoying to have your hair, your clothes, your underwear, your tent, your quilt, your shoes, your socks, your feet just be damp and sticky 100% of the time. On the trails I'm used to at the peak heat of the day, I could lay out all of my gear in a yard sale and in 30 minutes expect it to just be completely dry, and that is not the case on the long trail. Previously, I'd never understood the idea of camp clothes. It just felt like extra weight when I was perfectly fine just sleeping in the clothes I hiked in that day. However, on the long trail, I did really appreciate having a dry pair of pants, a dry t-shirt, and a dry pair of socks to change into in my tent at the end of a day. It was such a mental relief to put something on my body that was not sticky and damp and muggy. Lesson 8 is that the easy town access you get out east is a little bit of a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to your budget. The trails on the long trail are some of the best parts of the entire experience. The towns have so much history and culture and friendly locals, but it also has so many things that are going to tempt you to spend a lot of money. If you're 10 miles into a day and it's raining and it's buggy and your legs hurt and you're not feeling it, and you know that in 10 minutes you can get to a road, hitchhike into a town, and have a dry bed and an iced latte, it is so hard not to do that. When I broke down the cost per mile on this trail as compared to my previous trails, I realized that I spent so much more on the long trail just because I kept hitchhiking into town to get maple flavored treats for the fall. I will say a maple creamy, which is like a little maple soft serve, is well worth the price, and if you ever find yourself in Stowe in the fall, it is worth blowing your budget on 1,000 maple creamies. Lesson 9 is how much easier the navigation system out east made the hike. On the Continental Divide Trail, I was glued to my phone, I was glued to my map, because it was so easy to miss turns in the trail, and since things weren't really signed, you could go 5, 10, 15 miles before ever realizing that you weren't on the right trail. On the long trail, everything is blazed every couple of feet, so if I went more than 3 minutes without seeing a blaze, I would just have this thought of, oh, I should check my map, maybe I'm going the wrong way. And typically, I wasn't, I was just missing the blazes. Every junction was clearly signed, there were arrows everywhere, and I could just turn my brain off and walk, and that was such a freeing feeling. Obviously, physically, the long trail is so hard, so I was still ending the day exhausted, but the mental exhaustion kind of just wasn't there, and that was beautiful. Lesson 10 is that I actually like pooping in the dirt. And I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, but something I was excited for on the long trail were the privies along the trail. Every shelter typically had a privy attached to it, which is basically just an outdoor outhouse. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm gonna use a privy every day. I didn't realize how much those privies were going to really gross me out. Maybe it's because I've been writing for the Trek for a while, and it feels like every year the new headline is norovirus all-time high, everyone's getting noro on the AT, those privies are just noro sinkholes. But every time I'd even look at a privy, I felt like I needed to wash my hands. I would so much rather dig a cat hole, do my business in the dirt, cover it back up, and know that I wasn't touching anything else that someone else touched as they were taking a poop. I think if you asked 8-year-old me, she would be surprised to learn that I'm saying that the most sanitary thing I could think of doing on the trail was pooping in the dirt after digging a hole, but here I am saying that. So with all these lessons, what's next? How did the long trail really shape how I feel about backpacking? In the macro sense, it didn't really change much. I went into that trail knowing that I loved hiking long distances, and I came out of that trail knowing that I loved hiking long distances. However, this trail was sort of my litmus test to see if I would ever even enjoy trying to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail. I knew that if I thru-hiked the long trail in the perfect season in the fall with the beautiful colors and I still hated the experience, then probably the AT is not the trail for me. But I kind of loved it. I had my fair share of adversity. I tore my quad muscle coming down Camel's Hump. I ended up separating from my hiking partner because he didn't have time to wait while I took some days off in town to heal. I dealt with the rain, with the bugs, with all of the things about the East I thought were going to be annoying, and I still came out the other end not wanting the trail to end. It took maybe 2 weeks of consistent showers before I felt any semblance of clean following that trail, but I have to admit that trail does make the Appalachian Trail really rise on my radar of the hike I want to do next. If you've thru-hiked the long trail and it taught you any lessons, comment them below, and if you have any tips for someone who's maybe looking to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail, definitely let me know. I hope to see you out there. I'd love to share a maple creamy and watch a moose on Mount Mansfield. Happy trails!